So hi all, I really apologize for all the technical difficulties that you had to endure. I'm so sorry. I had a power supply problem over here, and it was interrupted. My stream was interrupted, and I don't have much of technical knowledge to get my stream back. And I lost my stream, so I'm really sorry if you had to wait so much for this. I think we should just start off with our classes. And I presume my audio is right for everyone. And if you have any issues, do let me know that now. And no, I really hope that there wouldn't be any problem for this stream. And I think we should start off with our classes. So today's class is all about Vedic age and Vedic culture. And if you just look into the Vedic culture, there's sort of like stark contrast from the Indus Valley civilizations in comparison to the Vedic age. And why is that? That is, if you have seen the previous video about the Indus Valley civilizations, they are all about these, amenities, facilities, and the equipment, that is the bathrooms, the technical infrastructures, the economy, the political structure, the administrative structure is well defined and well organized. But when find over here, when they decline and when a new phase or a new period start developing, what we find over here in Vedic culture is that these people are more into the religious aspect. They are more into sort of like a nomadic or semi-nomadic. In Indus Valley civilization, they are well settled, well urban planning. They are well defined urban settlement, township they had. But over here in Vedic culture, they're mostly nomads. And from the Indus Valley civilizations, their occupation changed to pastoral or semi-nomadic. So why all these reasons and why it's such a stark contrast started emerging over here? So we're going to discuss all that. So I think we should just wait for 5 more minutes for all the students to come join us. Because of all these technical issues, I'm sure most students will be having lots of problem, and they wouldn't even know that the class started in a different stream. So yes, yeah, so yes, so I think we should just start off with it. So Vedic culture, if you just look into it, this could be divided into two categories. That is the early Vedic period and the later Vedic period. And if you just look into the Vedic period, one stark contrast or one difference that we find is that Indus Valley civilizations whereby the indigenous people, and indigenous people means the people who are inhabitants of this place. But Vedic page or Vedic period is by the people who are from the different regions. That is all these Aryans. Aryans are the ones which belong to the Vedic culture. So these Aryans are sort of like immigrants from different regions. So that is the main difference of Indus Valley civilizations and Vedic culture. Indus Valley civilizations, inhabitants, the people over here, the indigenous people, but the Vedic age, people are Aryans. That is these people who came from Central Asian, that is Indo-European culture kind of these people came over here. So yes, and the we also have one famous theory. I think most of you have heard of it, and we might even have some debates over the same topic in schools. I had, and the topic is that these Aryans are the reason why the Indus Valley civilizations came to a halt, and this decline, this great civilization decline. The reason was Aryans, and it's still debatable, and still the debates are going on. But if we just look into all the evidences, one thing we can find is that sure enough, they are immigrants, they came from different places, and this sort of like coincides with each other. That is, the Indus Valley civilization declining and a new phase starting or incepting in this sort of like coincidence. But I think these are just coincidences. The reasons to be said is that these Aryans came like sort of like in sects or different groups. That is probably 5 or 6 tribes came once, and 2 or 3 years later another 20 or 30 tribes came. So they came over here in waves or in phases. They didn't come together like sort of like an army or in battalion. They didn't come here marching towards the indigenous people, and they didn't attack anyone. So they are to be identified as immigrants rather than the invaders. For example, if you just look into all these Mumbai of Maharashtra, we can find lots of the migrant laborers over there. That is, these people from different parts of the nation. Some people from coming from the Bengal, Bihar, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and different peoples and different sectors are there in Mumbai or Maharashtra. But these immigrants or these migratory laborers, they are not trying to overpower all these indigenous Marathi. or these Marathi people. So this could be compared to these Aryans over here. They are immigrants and not invaders. They came here, try to settle over here, try to mingle with these people. So they didn't try to create a chaos over here. So this is to be believed over here, and this we cannot for sure say that Aryans are the ones or Aryans are not the ones reason for the decline of Indus Valley civilization. This is just a speculation, and this is just a theory. And yes, they are the foundational religion of India, and we could proudly say that India as a place, sort of like a manufacturing company or a manufacturing industry, and we have created lots of religion. And the prominent religion, if you could just say or look into, is Hinduism for the first one, and then Jainism, Buddhism. So all these religions came. So what is the foundational basis of all these religions over here in India? And the Indus Valley civilizations, from that we can find is that India during Indus Valley civilizations, all these people they weren't bothered about these religion. We can find lots of classification, but the classification weren't due to religion. The classification were due to all these classes. That is probably the higher rich merchants were regarded to be upper, and lower class middle or the agriculture people. All these not very much rich merchants will be considered the lower ends. So they were sort of like stratification, but the difference was the other. But from the Vedic period, we can find all these superstitions, traditions, cultures, everything started to be formed, and it is more refined during the later Vedic period. And within the Vedic period, if you just look into it, the early Vedic period and the later Vedic period, they are both, stark contrast. All these, features of the early Vedic period are totally different from the later Vedic period. I'm not just talking about the religious aspect, the economical aspect, administrative, political. So all the aspects are different from these later and the early Vedic period. So this is also a reason why I could say that no, Aryans are not the reasons why the Indus Valley civilizations came to a decline. And religion based on the worship of many gods and goddesses, yes, and primarily Aryans, they worship elements of nature, that is fire, then sun god, then water, then wind. So all these Varuna, Agni and all. So we're going to come discuss all that. The reasons to be said is that these Aryans were the people, they're totally dependent on the nature. That is, it is being already being established they are nomadic people or semi-nomadic. So they were totally dependent upon the climate or the natural precipitations of rain or water or whatever that is. So when they move from one place to the other, okay, my pitch is little high. I'm so sorry. Okay, so if I would reduce my volume, will that be fine? Hello. So is my voice too high or hello? Okay, so I think I should just slow down speed. Okay, so you meant to say that my pace is not right. Okay, fine. I could just slow down. Yes, so the other reasons to be said is that these people were semi-nomadic or nomadic. So what do you mean by nomadic? Nomadic means people who are just in one place and they used to, just keep on traveling from one place to the other depending upon the climate. Climate in the region is that since they are nomadic people, they didn't have proper cultivations. They had a mature farming, but they didn't have the full-fledged agriculture or the, the cultivation that we're talking about. Probably they'll have just a local area, sort of like all these mature farming they'll have. Even we have it in our kitchen garden. So that's it. So it's very much immature. So they have to totally dependent upon the climate. And the other reason is that these people were highly cattle and sheep rearers. So since they were herders, they needed grass, water, and all the eminent facilities and resources. Okay, strategy for yeah, sure. I've already made few videos of strategy for UPSC. You could check that. And today's class, I'm discussing about the Vedic period, that is the Vedic culture. So, yes. So, yes, as I was saying that these people totally dependent upon all these external factors. So, for those reasons, they felt that they have to somehow please all these natural elements or these physical elements, that is the rain or the sun or the other elements like water, oceans, cease. So all these, for those reasons, these religions became more prominent. And okay, you could just continue speaking with a lot of respect. Okay, for those reasons, they totally believed, and they started having religion with they started having religion on the basis of fear and not on the basis of belief. More than that, they have started having fear for this climate, and fear that the climate wouldn't be favorable to them. For those reasons, they started having religion on the basis of nature, and they were nature worshippers. And the ancient religion is depicted in collections of oral poetry, prose, hymns, prayers, chants, spells, and commentaries known as Vedas. And yes, during these period, we could say that the archaeological evidences that we could find are very limited. But we have lots of literary sources and literary evidences. The reasons are that these people are highly nomadic people. That is, we have to find a structure or a building, and for that, they are nomads. So they'll have all these semi-paka kind of houses, these thatched straw houses. So for those reasons, we can't find all these archaeological sources. Since they are not, well-defined houses, this will be destroyed. So we have to depend lots of on the literary sources, which is the Vedas. And even the Vedas, we had to wait lots of period. That is, Vedas initially were orally transmitted. That is, from one generation to the other, it was orally transmitted from one generation to the other. And only after lots of years, this started to be formed or sort of like a literary source. That is, they started writing it down. And the first such Veda, if you could just look into it, is Rigveda. Okay, already I've made the slides. I'll try to make any difference in the next coming classes. Right now, I know the options and I'll try to minimize. Okay, now this is fine. Okay, and yes, yeah. So what was I saying? Yeah, and we could say that since we all know that lots of Vedas are being, started or created during the Vedic period. But the first Veda or the first literary sources that we could look into is the Rig Veda. And Rig Veda is considered to be the first literary source or the first document written by human or mankind in the entire world. And we have a different name also for the Vedic age, and that is okay. Thank you so much. And yes, so as I was saying, is that yeah, we have a different name associated to the Vedic age, and that is Rig Vedic. The reason is that Rig Veda was created during the early Vedic period, and the other Vedas, that is all the Yajur Veda, the Veda, all these were composed in the later Vedas, and this will be discussed. And yes, all these literary sources were more like prayers and hymns and interpretation or the meanings of these prayers and the understandings or the philosophical ideas. So these were the sources, and from that we could disappear lots of meanings into it. And the other sort of examples are the epics. Epics, for the example, Mahabharata, Ramayana. I'm not just saying that this is entirely, biographical or autobiographical. It's sure enough, it's mythological. That is, they have added or exaggerated lots of points, lots of magical exaggerations are being made into it, but we will have lots of idea of their culture, of their traditions, of the administrative structures by reading all these scriptures. Even the epics contribute a lot to it, and we have to be proud that Mahabharata is said to be the longest ever mythological book ever recorded or written. And yes, we have two biggest epic, which is Mahabharata and Ramayana, and yes, written down many centuries later, long after the Vedic age, like I said, these Vedas, that is, they were orally transmitted. And if you have seen all these, the all mythological serials and TV series, soaps and all, that is, they had lots of like Gurukula setup. That is, the students were settled over there. They used to stay in all these teachers, gurus' place, and they would study from the gurus, from the experience, from the teachings, and from all these things. So that is that they, and the next teacher will teach on the next students. So it was orally transmitted, and the idea was that it has to be inculcated. And we can only express our knowledge to someone else. We cannot just expect someone else to, impart the knowledge by themselves. Probably that is the reason why it was orally transmitted at first. And yes, cycle of life, that is reincarnation, rebirth, karma, dharma, all these, if you could say, the rigid systems of the present Indian culture were formed thousands of years before during the Vedic period, and reincarnations of soul from one earthly life to another also rose in this period. And yes, early Vedic period from 1500 to 1000, and the later Vedic period is from 1000 to 500 BC. And yes, Rigveda was composed over here, and Ved means knowledge. And it is not just knowledge. For example, what I'm teaching right now is history. But this is a different kind of a knowledge. For them, knowledge is something from the God. The God gave them knowledge. So that knowledge is being discussed or being inculcated to the other students. So this was the idea that all these Rigvedic people had. Ved is not just study of maths, study of science and all. For them, knowledge or Ved is a knowledge being given from divine or authoritative power. And yes, all this literature in India and world, mandals were that is during the early Vedic period. The Rig Veda was composed, but only the 10 mandals, that is from 7 to 7, were composed over here, and the rest of mandals means chapters. So each Vedas will have different chapters and suttas and all. So from here, 2 to 7 mandals or 2 to 7 chapters were composed during this period, and each mandals means chapters will have 1028 suttas, and these suttas are further classified and divided into 10,462 slokas. Slokas are the the one line or two lines stanza that we find, and I'm sure most of you have read or at least seen Bhagavad Gita. So we can find all these slokas and stanzas from that. And mostly the content of all these are Aryan struggle with non-Aryans and struggles with Aryans as well. That is all these different tribes. And so is it fine now? Hello, 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 hello. Am I fine? Hello. So I think we are back to track. I'm so sorry. So I think it's all fine now. Do let me know the comments. Is it still buffering for everyone? Is it fine now? Hello. So I think it's fine now. Hello. So I'm so sorry again for the interruption. I should say the Indian electricity connection is not very good. They keep disconnecting. I don't know why it's not power grid or something, but I'm so sorry again for the interruption. I think we should just start on with the class where we stopped. So are we all with me? Are you all with me? So I think we should just continue with all the rest of it to make my screen even smaller for the convenience of everyone. So yes, so as I was saying is that okay, so I think we are just back to the track. So as I was saying is that the literary sources or what we can find is that even the Mahabharata or Ramayana that we can find, it's always about struggles within the indigenous community or within themselves. That is, like I said before the power cut happened, that was that even we are here as Indians, but we are not together as one. We have different cultural identities and different association towards us. That is, there will be different people on the basis of language. That is on the linguistic basis, on the state basis, and the other cultural basis. There will be lots of segregation and demarcation. So similarly, on the same thing over here, that was all these people had these Aryans, they had their own differences. So for those reasons, they had struggles within these tribes, within the Aryans itself, and also struggles with the non-Aryans, that is Dravidians. And the sources will be that how these people of these Rakshasa Gunas or all these people, non-Aryans or Dravidian people, how unwelcoming they were, and how they try to capture us, and how we try to capture them, and how the struggle power between all these people, or between these two communities were. So such things were the content, and such things were the literary sources. And the Aryans, if you could say that, they came to the northwestern India, that is, like I said, they came in different phases or in different ways. They didn't come here all together, but they came here slowly by slowly. Probably they took a whole of a century for all the Aryans to come immigrate over here in India. They came here slowly in different structural segments. So do let me know if you have any buffering problem or anything else. So I think it's all right. So yes, so that is so they came over here in different phases and different segments. So they try to have their own religious sector, their own community, and their own cultural impact over here. And yes, they entered India in different groups at different times. And India was and one thing is that the name India, or if you could say that the present name, the Bharat or India, was not a name given by them. The names were actually given by these people that we had trade with. During the Indus Valley civilizations, India had extensive trade both inland and with the foreign nations. So all these people that we had trade with, that is all these Greek, these different Egyptian civilizations, these Bahrain, Oman, all these people were highly civilized, and we had sort of like a trade or a barter system within these people. So they named us Hindu or Sindhu. That is, we had Sindhu River or Indu River, Indus River, and the people which is beyond the river Indus were known as Indians, and that's how the name India came into being. And India called as Sapta Sindhu by them. Sapta Sindhu was this is a name given by the Aryans. That is, India had seven prominent rivers over here, and Sapta means seven, Sindhu means river. And Sapta Sindhu, that is the main famous river, and these are the old names, okay? Sindhu, that is Indus, and Vipash, that is BS that we have right now, and Jhelum was earlier known as Vidasha and Ravi River. These are the tributaries of Indus River. And yes, over here we can find is that this is the Indus River, and all these are the tributaries of the Indus River. So we cannot just say that these are the independent rivers. And yes. So the Chenab's name was Asikni, and Satluj name was Shaturdi, and we had Saraswati. And they spoke Sanskrit. And one thing we can find in comparison to the other Scandinavian or other Caucasian language is that we could find similarities between our language and the Scandinavian or European language. If you just look into it, that is Brada or brother. Brada is Sanskrit name for brother, and Mada or Mada means mother, and the English word or the European Scandinavian word for that is mother. And three and three over there, and lots of different or lots of similarities we could find even in the pronunciations or the meaning of these words. So reason is that these people came over here from different regions, that is the Central Asian places, that is European people. The indigenous language over here was Pali and Prakrit, and Sanskrit was a language brought in by these immigrants or these Aryans. And Vedic age started with the Aryans' occupations of Indo-Gangetic plains. That is, these people, these nomadic tribes and nomadic people, they need to have some sort of like, resources. And one thing is already being established that these are nomadic people, and they're totally dependent upon the nature, which is river, water, precipitations, and safe climate, safe from all these wild animals and everything. So, what is more better area or much better places than all these plains that we know? These already established civilizations that we had. They are much, all these resources, that is, all these natural resources are very much abundant in all these places. So they started occupying in all these Indo-Gangetic plains, and meaning of our word Aryan is noble. So, if you could say Columbus discovered India, and this is true, and this is also a false. Sure enough, from their place, he was the first person to discover India, but before him discovering India was there. And we had lots of series of trade with other places, and our historians have the evidence that India was a nation was already established in the histories. But Columbus, from his native, was the first person to have knowledge about a different place, a different exotic nation. So same over here, they named themselves to be Aryans, and the meaning of the Aryan is noble. and they had rural semi-nomadic life as compared to Indus Valley people who were urbanized. That is, these Indus Valley civilizations, these people were highly organized urban sectors. They had well organized planning. For example, the Chhattisgarh, if you could look into the present Chhattisgarh, they are well structured, well planned, and sort of like organized sectors are there. And if you have seen the previous class, we can find is that the township was planned in grid system. That is, everything was parallelogram setup. Everything was in perfect particular order, and there was the upper area and lower area, residential area, industrial area, citadels. It was well organized, and when it declined, when the new phase, a different phase started, that is the Vedic period started, we can find that these people started disintegrating in terms of development as well. And not just with the rural settlements, they started being nomads. From the permanent settlement, they started being nomads or semi-nomads. And if you could just look into, I'm saying in comparative format so that it's much easier for you to understand, rather than by hearting lots of actual information. It will be so much easier when you compare one aspect to the other. So for those reasons, I'm comparing Indus Valley and Vedic period. So yes, that is, Indus Valley people were highly dependent on agriculture and trade. And these people, that is these Vedic period people, they were highly dependent upon deering and animal herding, and they had some immature forms of farming. I'm not talking about well-defined or well-defined or well-structured agriculture or cultivations, just mature farming, probably just for a particular season. That's it. And they used to keep on shifting from one place to the other. For those reasons, they wouldn't need proper, well-defined, highly equipped cultivations and all. And they entered India through the Khyber Pass. Yes, that's well-defined. That's well understood for us. Is that there is a pass over here for the western frontier, and Khyber Pass was the place that they could enter over here. And like I said, these people were herders and nomads. They had lots of prominence for the word or for the species of cow. And cow means not just cow. Cow. This cow also means horse, sheep, cattle, even man and humans also. Even they are considered to be cow. And the prominence that they have given to the sheep or the cow that we find is that it's been 176 times being mentioned over there in all the scriptures. That is so much of prominence they're giving to the word Gao, or prominence to the aspect of Gao. And why is that? And one thing we can find is that since they didn't have any physical territory, that is, why do we have, why do we have a sort of like a different elements or different expressions of richness? For example, how do I say or how do we say that Ambani is rich? He is rich because he has lots of money and he has lots of areas, lots of physical infrastructural buildings. That is, all these factories, manufacturing companies. So all these are physical structures. But over here in Vedic period, what we can find is that they did not have any physical structures. For them, the richness were measured in terms of gau. That is, how many gaus, or gaus means anything could be included in that. That is, sheep, animals, then goat, even humans were considered to be in that. So how many gaus that you had by yourself, how many ownership that you had over there. So that is the basis of how you could describe one to be rich and poor. And there were lots of war and lots of battles were fought on the basis of Gau. That is to have the Gau. That is, if you could look into our history or the Mughal history or these Turkish empires invasions, we can find why do they invade over here in India? Why do they have war? For the reasons of land, for the territorial reclamations, for the extending their boundaries. Even British India came over here so that they could have a physical power over here, imperialism over here. But for these people, they wanted to possess cattle. So cattle was the element that they wanted to possess for the reasons for their battle, reasons for their fight. And they were so much obsessed with the word go that they had lots of meanings assigned to it. That is, Gomat is said to be a wealthy, rich, prosperous person is considered to be Gomat. And Gavisti is battle for cattle. That is, like I said, what we can find probably 300 or 500 years before, we can find all these people, they used to have fighting, all these battle between all these kingdoms for land or for property, but all these people, they had battle for the cattle. And Gopati is Raja or chief. They had a Raja, they had a kingship, but the only difference is that he didn't have a physical kingdom, he had people under him. That is, he had Janas. Janas are the community who is under him. And these janas used to, shift according to his own patterns. For example, during summer season, he will be settled over Beer side, that is on the plains of Beers. And the next season, he will be, shifting towards Sutlej region. And the Raja's ideas will be according to these people. And Goduli is measurement of time, Gavyuti is measurement of distance. So even for all the aspects, they use the word Gau. So they were so much obsessed, and the prominence and importance of Gau, or Gau means all aspects are included. That is sheep, goat, and every other animals. And one thing also, if I could say that horse as an animal was not found here in India before the Aryans invasions over here. And it is to be believed that Aryans are the ones who brought in horses over here in India. And yes, even this is just speculations. We are not for sure, but these are the what historians are trying to claim. And the political structure that we can find is that, as I said, these Rajas, they were monarchical in structure. That is, after a father's demise, his son will be the next king, the next successor will be his own son, and like that it will be going on. But he didn't have a territorial structure. He had a jana, or a group of community of people under him, and group of cattle and sheep and goat, everything under him. And it was patriarchal families, that is the normal present Indian situations that we can find. Dominance of man, but still the women had equal rights and women had equal respect during those period, that is during the earlier Vedic period. Okay, and Jana was the largest social unit in Rigvedic period. Jana or kingdom. Okay, do not measure a kingdom on the aspects of political or physical powers, but see that in terms of humans. Okay, on the base of humans it is being territorial. In base of humans we could say this is a kingdom, Janas. So Kula, if you could subdivide everything, Kula is just family, probably a father, mother, and two kids. And Grama is actually their extended families, their chatas, mosas, mosis, and all. And Visus are their own friends and family friends and all these people. And from that all together comprises to be Janas. So these are, for example, we have Puruvamsh and Yaduvamsh and all. So these Puruvamsh is one Jana, one kingdom, and from that Puruvamsh, we could find individual structural visus, and one visus we could find grammas, and one individual grammas we could find single nuclear or joint families, or kulas. And there were lots of tribals in the sense that these were the names of tribals or category or community of people that we could be assigned to it. And the examples of Bharatas, Matsyas, Yadus, and Purus, and they had their own assemblies, political or structural system to it, and the names were Sabhas or Samitis. And the social structure as women enjoyed a respectable position. And one example could be Samyukta, and some women, they even have composed lots of prose and Vedas also along with it. This is observed only during the early Vedic period. Okay, during towards the later Vedic period, we don't find that, and we find a decline of respect for women during the later Vedic period. And they were allowed to take part in sabhas and samitis. That is, for all these administration, political meetings and the discussions, they are given the permission, or they have the power to have their own opinions and assertions towards it. There were women poets also in it, that is Apala, then we have Kosa. So all these are important, and cattle, especially cows, became very important. Monogamy was practiced, but polygamy was also absorbed among royalty and noble families. That is, I'm sure you all know what monogamy and polygamy is. Monogamy is having one spouse. That is, for example, a husband will be having one wife, or a wife will be having just one husband. But polygamy is a wife could have many husbands, or a husband could have many wives. The idea is that the more rich you have, the more spouses you will have. That is, for example, saying is that the more car or more vehicles that you have, this is an indication of someone's culture and richness. That is, in a way, that I am able to afford so many cars, so many vehicles in my garage. I could, fuel all these cars. So in this way, it was considered to be a sort of like a practice. That is, sure enough, it was monogamy for these people who are not able to afford one or two number of spouses, and this was practiced within these royal and noble families. That is, these people, they had, or they were capable enough to feed many mouths. And social distinctions existed, but not very rigid, and it was hereditary. And Economic structure is, yes, pastoral and cattle rearing people. Indus Valley civilization people, they were highly agricultural and traders. But over here, they're pastoral herders and cattle rearers, and they practice agriculture. But I'm not saying the hardcore agriculture that we're talking about, just mature farming. The reason is they keep on shifting one place to the other. For those reasons, they couldn't depend upon one particular base. So those reasons, they would have just short term basis crop. For example, sugarcane, or for example, grass, or these takes lots of time to grow. Some even take a year or 2 or 3 years, and we can't stay over there a mango. Just because we plant a mango sapling over here, we are not going to stay over here for a long period of time. The reason is that these Aryans were nomadic people, and they used to travel from one place to the other. So they used to, invest only on these short-term basis of cultivations. Whatever rice or cedars they could get, whatever would give them immediate result, that is immediate harvest, which enable them only those kinds of crops they used to harvest and all. And the products out of copper, iron, bronze were in use. Like I said, a horse was an animal which is said to be brought in by the Aryans. For those reasons, they need chariots, and for the chariots they need metals. So why do they need chariots? For battles and wars. And why do they need battles and wars? For gaining or procuring lots of cows or cattle and herds. So rivers were also used for transportation, such as all these rafts and boats were used, and cotton and woolen fabrics were spun and used. And initially, trade was conducted through the barter system, but later on, a coin called niksha was used. That is, initially, even cow was considered to be sort of like a marker for the barter system, but after that, they started having their own currency. And the religion they worship forces, that is the earth, fire, wind. It was totally dependent upon the nature. Why is that? It was not out of belief, it was out of fear that this nature wouldn't favor them. That is, if you could look into the other geographical historical aspects, we could find is that the rivers would change its path or change its course. For example, if the river is passing through this way, but the next season it will totally dry up or it will move towards this side. So this will drastically affect all these people. The reason is that they are not technologically that much developed or advanced. For those reasons, they were highly dependent upon all these natural elements. And since they are not settling people, they are not settlers, they are not investing their hard work into it. And since their cattle and animals needs water, food, shelter, and safe environment and climate, they totally worship all these nature. They felt that they have to worship the nature, and only if the nature or these fire god or water god or wind god would be pleased by them, they will be having lots of blessings. So this was the basis of the religion. This is how the religion as an aspect came into being. And female deities were also known Usha and Aditi. There were no temples or no idol worships. And why is that again? Because they were nomads. So one thing is that do not just mug up history, try to have a factual understanding of it. So everything is interrelated. One thing is related to the other. Since because of that, this thing is having, and because the implications is that. Why is that? Because that. So have a total, link everything. So it will be so much easier, and you wouldn't have to buy heart anything. And once you read it, once you have a total understanding, sort of like you watch a movie, you know the story or the structure lines of it, and even after 5 or 3 years, you would remember the story. The reason is why you have a complete, visual element to it. Here we don't have the visual element, but try to have a complete linking between these two all. So yes, and once in India, they settled down as rulers over the native, that is Janapadas. So we are going to be taking that in the coming classes. These nomad, that is semi-nomadic people, these Aryans, they started, being settlers. That is, they stopped being all these nomads and moving from one place to the other, and they started settling over here as permanent rulers. And from that, we can find Janapadas. Janapadas is actually a physical establishment of kingdoms. So this is where all these started. And yes, once in India, they settled down as rulers over the native Dravidian populations. They founded a formed tribe kingdoms, and different kingdoms were often at war with one another. For example, Mahabharata, Ramayana, we could find is that sure enough they are the exaggerated versions of the, the political or administrative system. But even just reading them, we could get a clear understanding of their structure, of how their culture, how their polity was, and from that we can find that war or battle as an element was highly frequent. So this is just a comparative table, and no worries, if you just follow me on my Telegram channel, I'll be providing all the PPT slides over there, and mostly I'll be uploading the PPT slides today itself, tonight itself. And these are the differences between the Indus Valley civilizations and the Vedic culture. The reasons why it is being comparative study, because these are two interdependent or interrelated cultures or phases, and sure enough, one came after the other, but even then, lots of differences are there between these two cultures. So we're going to see that, and we already covered all these, points, but we're just going to rush through all that. Indus Valley civilizations, they were urban civilizations. That is, a proper structural township was there. Here's rural civilizations. Here, the utmost priority was trade, commerce, and agriculture. Here's pastoral and semi-nomadic people. Pastoral is rearing and all, herding and all. And they have icon idol worshippers. This is God in the form of nature. Why do we say idol worshippers? We didn't have any structural buildings or temples, but we have got few examples of, small deities and dancing girls and beard man. So it is to be believed that these were God or these were deities. And Mother Goddess was people, tree, and bull. Here's more of sort of like a natural element. Here, why do we say they had the belief from external forces? Why is that? They didn't fear the nature, because most of the elements were in their control. And Indus Valley civilizations, they didn't know the art of iron, and here they use various metals, not aware of horse or no prominence to cow, and cow is the utmost priority here. It is to be believed that these people, they were, omnivores. They ate both vegetables and cows and everything, but over here cow is considered to the utmost priority, to a way that they started having battles and wars for procuring lots of cows for themselves. And here horse was known, but here it is to be believed that the Aryans brought in horse with them, and undeciphered script, that we have said that was to feed in from right to left, left to right, right to left. And just going through the points that I've discussed in the last class. And if you haven't seen, just watch that class after this video. And the script is not, we cannot understand. Still, it's undeciphered, and the meaning of it is still not understood. And the reason is that the sentences will be very short, and the here they contribute to the Vedic literature. That is, the most prominent Vedas, the Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharvaveda, all these are the most prominent ones, and Rigveda is considered to be the most oldest ever recorded human literature. And we have lots of urns and earth burials. Here, cremations. Difference is that these two have traditions, but here more of customs and beliefs. So cremation is something in a way that we are, praying lots of homage in a way that this soul will be passed on to the next life, that next life as a human, and lots of traditional customs and practices will be there. Here it's just believe that the person will be having an afterlife after death, that is in a different life, in a different place altogether. And these were the inhabitants, that is, these were the indigenous people, but over here, the immigrants, that they came from the Khyber Pass, from the Central Asian places, that is, Indo-European places. And the period where Aryans first settled in India is also known as early Vedic period. And later Vedic period is from 1000 to 500 BC. And we have, during the early Vedic period, we have lots of literary sources rather than the archaeological sources. But towards the later Vedic period, we find lots of archaeological sources. Why? From the semi-nomadic tribe, they started settling down. So once they settled, we could get physical structures, physical tools and weapons and all these aspects from that. So literary sources are Vedas and epics. Epics are these Mahabharata, Ramayana. Archaeological sources are iron and pottery. Iron for ploughing, that is the cultivation, the agriculture started to be more refined. And pottery is that the art forms, they started flourishing, the culture started flourishing a lot. And literary sources, if you could take into it, Vedas and epics. And Vedic texts are divided into two categories, that is during the early Vedic period and later Vedic period. And like I said, Rigveda was composed in early Vedic period, but only the majority of portion of Rigveda was composed in the early Vedic period. The rest of it, that is, only from 2 to 7 mandals were composed in the early Vedic period of Rigveda. And the other portions were composed over here in later Vedic period. And the other prominent Vedas, that is, uh, you know, the Adhara Veda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, all these were composed over here along with the other branches, that is Brahmanas, Aryanakas, Upanishads, etc. etc. Upanishads are just, philosophy sort of. So different genres of books or literary sources started evolving over here. Other three Vedas or the other three Vedas, okay, Yadur, Sama, and Atharva Veda. And Vedic literature was written in Sanskrit. That is, Sanskrit was the language from people who immigrated over here, language of the indigenous Indians, or these inhabitants' languages. Prakrit. Is this Nitin Singhania's text? I don't understand. Okay, so okay, fine. So that is okay, and Sanskrit and the term Veda means knowledge. And like I said, knowledge is not the knowledge that I'm giving right now, not the history or geography, knowledge which is said to be from the God. It is God given, it's divine force. So this is said to be Veda. And Veda literature is divided into two parts, Shruti and Smriti. And Shruti was given by God to sages, and Smriti was composed by rishis and sages. So, like I said, knowledge, what they believed, all these Aryans believed to be, is that this is not, totally composed. This is from the God. God given divine powers. From that they composed it. And the four prominent Vedas are Rigveda, Sama, Yadur, and Adharva Veda. Rigveda 2 to 7 were composed in the early Vedic period. The other, totally, Rigveda have 10 mantras, okay? Mantras means chapters. And their samhitas, hymns and prayers. The Brahmanas means the meaning, the interpretations of all these, scripts and Vedas. Prose text and that explain the meaning of the hymns attached to each Samhita. And Aryanaka is forest books. The reason is that all these hermitage, all these, yogis and sannyasis, they used to be settled over here in forest. Sort of like, travelogue, or sort of like an encyclopedia for all these people, for all these forest dwelling people. And Upanishads is very much, I think most of you that we all know of. Uh, okay, thing is that I am actually following the NCRT. This is the NCRT series, and I'm starting off with the six standards. And sure enough, I'm going through the NCRT series, but also I'm adding few points also with pertinent to your UPSC syllabus. Also, the reason is that we wouldn't have again a time to add on the portions later on after studying NCRTs. Then we'll add on little portions. So I thought I'll start with the NCRTs with all the added informations also as well, so that it will be easier for you from the starting itself. Okay, and Upanishads are, even still now we use the word, oh, he is into Upanishads, means he is philosophical in nature. So he'll be saying lots of, highly, deep, meaningful sentences and all. So these are philosophical thoughts of sages. But even all these scripts, this thing we have to understand and underline, that is, all these scripts, even the philosophical thoughts of sages, are not by them. It is to be believed that it is from the God, from the divine power. And the four Vedas, Rigveda, Sama, Yadur, and Atharva Veda. Rigveda is said to be the oldest religious text in the world, and it is even said to be the first testament of mankind. Yes, it was composed during the early Vedic period. It contains hymns dedicated to sages, to gods. It contains famous Gayatri Mantra. And I'm sure all of you must have heard of it, Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha. And that is Gayatri Mantra. Everything is being included over here. And Samaveda means they are sort of like sweet song. That is sort of like a praise song. And Rig Veda, if you could, distinguish between the meaning of all these Vedas, this is sort of the Rig Veda is sort of like their genre sort of like describing God. But Sama Veda sort of like eulogy, or praising God, or sort of like song structure. And these hymns are sung by priests at the time of sacrifices, not just for sacrifices, even for the rituals and all. And Yajurveda deals with rituals and hymns recited during performing yajnas. And Atharva Veda, it deals with magic and charm. And I'm sure most of you have heard of it, Atharva Vedas and all these, prayers and hymns of, having knowledge, of having prosperity and riches and all. And Brahmanas, they've written in prose after the Vedas. Why? Because Brahmanas said to be the interpretations of all these Vedas. For those reasons, they are written after Vedas. Okay, This is just, I'm just covering just briefly of all these ancient Indian history, and for that, today's class is just about the Vedic culture, and I'm just, just giving the basic brief idea. Probably the class will last only for just 1 hour or so. And yes, okay, one thing about my class is that I'm just giving all the concise ideas, but everything will be covered. So don't think the class is long or the class is very much, it duration is longer than 1 hour. But I'll be covering lots of portions in short period of time. So see it like that. And yes, and Aryanakas, they are first books because the guidance of hermits, like I said, these gurukuls and all these hermits and all these people, they used to be settled in the forest. For those reasons, sort of like a manual or a guidebook for all these swamis and all. And Upanishads, they are philosophical thoughts of sages, soul, God, ultimate truth, karma, moksha, maya. These are the foundations of all the other Vedic. That is, on the basis of these philosophies, that is, we need to have our own principles. For example, here in India, we have certain ideologies over here, that is secular, right? Then we have religious, that is religious, secular aspects. Then we have, democratic, and all these are, very much foundations of our principles. On the basis of these foundations, we as democratic nations writing all these for ourselves. On the basis of that, only the coming constitutions are being made. Even if you make an amendment, it cannot contradict with our initial or the structural, understandings of it. We are a republic, and we cannot make it into a monarchy or a dictatorship in the future. The reason, this is our foundation, these are our principles. So, for those reasons, Upanishads are considered to be a foundation. That is, on the foundation of these thoughts only, these Vedas, everything was scripted. And importance of epics. Epics, that is these mythologies, Mahabharata, Brahma, Ramayana. And yes, again, I'm repeating my point is that these are exaggerated versions of it. That is, you cannot just pray and get, thunder, lightning, bolt in a hand. But this sort of like reflects the society or the political administrative structure of those people during those period, and gives informations about social, cultural, political life of people of the epic ages, and it gives informations about various kingdoms, their armies, weapons used by them. That is, what are the artifacts and what are the arms that they use, types of military assignments, and this is after Vedic period. Okay, during all these Janapadas and all, one thing we can find is that the greatest contribution Chanakya's Arthashastra. Here we can find lots of administrative structure into it. What was the idea? What was the administrative system during those periods? So all these are giving lots of insights into us, and history as something nobody is writing it down, right? For example, like we are writing diaries, these people, they are not writing diaries. So we are getting ideas from the implications. So for example, if I see a scale in, for example, I just opened a room and I found a scale and few pencils and paper. So I go, okay, fine. A student is the resident of this room. So such things, such implications are made in history, and only from that we are getting lots of understandings and meaning from that. And epics are considered as finest literary works with highest literary and philosophical values. Yes, if you could look into our all our Vedas and all, and we can find lots of philosophical values, lots of high structural, life changing, life altering thoughts and thought provoking ideas are being given in that. And great heroes of the epics are followed high moral principles. That is Madhyara Purushottam and Ram, and he is considered to me with someone with lots of upright values and a highly ethical person, and great impact on successive generations as well. The epics reveals importance of family. Bhagavad Gita explains karma and immortality of soul. Where do we find Bhagavad Gita? Inside Mahabharata. And these are just, you know, Mahabharata and Ramayana. I'm just quickly just going through it so that it will be so much easier for you. I'm sure most of you have lots of understanding of all our epics and mythologies, but I just quickly just go through it so that it will be easier for you to connect. Just remembering all these points will help you so much. That is, Sita is wife of Rama, and Rama, he is son of Dashratha and Kaushalya. He had three wives, and these four children are kids of Dashratha. He had three wives, and Rama is son of Kaushalya, and he was sent in 14 years of exile. And Ramayana was originally composed in Sanskrit in 3rd century by Valmiki. The story of Ramayana revolves around Rama and abductions of his wife Sita by the demon king Ravana. And King Dasharatha, ruler of Ayodhya, he had 4 sons and 3 queens. I'll just quickly go through it, okay? That is, his eldest wife's son was Rama, and he was considered to be the next successor. But the problem was that the king's next wife, second wife, Kaikeyi, she felt that her son wouldn't, he would never be. That is Bharat. Bharata would never get to be a king or a successor in coming future. That is, Raman's Rama will be the next king, and after his death, his children will be the next king. So when will her child, that is Bharat, will get a chance? For those reasons, Kaikeyi asked King Dasharatha to send Ram 14 years into forest for an exile, and Lakshman and his wife, that is Ram's wife Sita, also accompanied him, and also to make Bharat to be the king for 14 years. And after 14 years, Raman could come back and be the king again. And problem is that during his exile, Ravana, a demon king, he abducted Sita. So the whole of the 14 years was in a process of Raman trying to rescue his wife, trying to free his wife from Ravana's clutches. And yes, and this is our famous Mahabharata. Even Mahabharata is considered to be the most longest epic, longest ever written epic in the whole world. And just seeing the family structure will be so much evident to us. And so this is Kuru Vamsh, and Shantanu is considered to be a king, and he had wife Ganga, and from that he had Bhishma Pitamaha. And after Ganga, he married someone else, that's Satyavati, and from that he had Chitrangada, and from Chitrangada, the all the generations started coming. That is the Kauravas and Pandavas. So I'm sure you all know the story, so I shouldn't get on to it. Stories, in short, that is, these people, the Kauravas and Pandavas, struggle for the power and struggle for Dharma Yudh. And it's said to be setting the principles right, only the battle was started. And yes, these are just the story of it. And yes, Bhagavad Gita was said to be the most philosophical, or the high thought provoking part of Mahabharata. This was written during the battle. That is, during the battle when Arjuna, he was stammering. That is, he didn't know how to fight his own relatives. His own uncle is on the other side. His own relatives, his own cousins, and everyone is on the other side. And how can he go against them? And how can he fight the battle against his family? And that was when Krishna, he was the charioteer of Arjun. That was when Krishna came in and he gave him the advice, and that is known or called to be as Bhagavad Gita. And the war lasted 18 days, and Yudhishthir, that is the Pandava son, he became the king of Hastinapur. And the guru of Pandavas and Kauravas were Kripacharya and Dronacharya. And in the Prastha, that is, from before here it was Hastinapur, and after the Pandavas' victory, the capital was changed to Indraprastha. And the next, that is during, these are the literary sources, okay. Now the archaeological sources, if you look into, we have iron and pottery. Iron in the form is that, not just for example, this is an iron. I'm not just saying this is an iron. Even the chariot, if you just look into it, we could find lots of understanding of it. That is, what kind of people were there, what were their culture, what was the emotional attachment, what was the administrative structures of it. So every understanding, every meaning would be disappeared from all these structures and all. And from the pottery we could find the cultural aspect. What was their culture, what was their taste, and preferences. And iron, discovery of iron was not known during the industrial civilizations, but during the Vedic period, iron as a culture started to form and began in 1000 BC, and iron was harder metal than copper and bronze. Copper and bronze were present during those period, but here in Vedic period, iron was most prominently used, and it was cheap and available in plenty. So man could use iron to make a livelihood. It was used in following areas, that is for agriculture, for occupation, for defense, and agriculture, that is for plowing, and the axe for cutting or felling trees and all. So no, Indraprastha is not a modern name, but from the literary sources that we can find is that. So Hastinapura was, the place was changed. For example, here in India, the first initial capital was, Calcutta, and from that the Britishers. the British crown changed to Delhi, New Delhi. So like that. The name is different. Obviously, the names are different. And for example, Patliputra is actually Patna. So the names are different. So don't go by that. And iron was used to make axes which helped them to clear forests and cutting. That is when they started developing, when the population rised. And when the population rise, they need lots of spaces to settle. For that reason, they used to cut forests and even the livelihood. That is, they need woods for collecting fire and woods for all these fuel and other purposes. And they also made iron plow head sickles and hoes. And occupation, new trades. For example, for making a pen, I need machinery for making. Even though this is just a normal, simple pen, what do I need? I need machinery. I need factory. I need raw materials, inputs for that, and for that I need metals. All these irons are needed, and this is just a small, hairpin. And for that we need metals. For everything is dependent, and iron is said to be the backbone of all the industrial revolution and all the industrial sectors. And defense, yes, like we said, starting off the Vedic culture, that is, these people were totally immersed into all these battles and wars and fights. And the pottery is, we have two types, that is the grey ware and painted grey ware. And pottery was discovered at different sites. And the painted grey ware are considered to be very smooth and even colored. And the other one, they have lots of geometrical patterns painted on it, and some have, high quality clays. Reason why they are even surviving even today. For example, if you buy just a small pot today, and it's no guarantee that it's going to stay for 10 years, but this is just 1,000 years of pots, but they are still surviving. And this is just a proof that the quality of all these materials were very high. And the craftsmanship, yes, this could be observed from right from the period of Indus Valley civilizations. The craftsmanships and the precisions of these crafts period were so much impeccable. And they had few floral patterns into it, and later a new type of pottery called northern black polish ware also could be seen, and it was used by all these high class people. So these are the example. This is the black one. This is the gray PW. This is the black used by all these noble or rich royal people. And later Vedic period was starting from, that is, this started from 1500 to 1000 early. The later is 1000 to 500, and this spread. What we find over here, that is that it started to be more defined, more refined, and once they got a foothold over here, and once they established themselves over here, they started to settle over here. And how do they settle? By establishing and by developing their boundaries and all. They spread throughout North Indian territory. Center of culture shifted from Saraswati to Ganges. Sadapada Brahmana, eastern expansion of Aryans, emergence of Janapadas. Janapadas are, like I said before, towards the later Vedic period, we can find Janapadas, these Yadur Vamsha or Puru Vamsha and all. Janapadas are actually the territorial, physical territorial kingdoms of these tribes of these Aryans. Before it was just, just people. For example, this this is hypothetical example, okay? Janas will be comprising probably of 1,000 number of people, but hypothetically, I'm just saying that just 10 people. So I'm saying that my Jana and me will be one kingdom, and I will be shifting one place to the other, and the other Jana or the other tribe will be having their own people, probably according to the number. But over here we can find is that they started settling down, and the Kurus and Panchalas and Kashis and all these Vamsh and all these kingdoms started to emerge over here, and they started expanding towards south and the others till the Vindhyas. They started expanding, and the territorial division came to extensions. That is, North India we can find Aryavarta, and Central India we can find Madhya Desha, and South we can find Dakshinapad. So these are categories that we could, demarcate on the terms of these tribes. Tribes means Aryan tribes. Aryans of Vedic age had reached the highest stage of civilization during the later Vedic period. And here is, we can say, the pinnacle of this culture or pinnacle of these traditions, customs, religions, everything came to a pinnacle during the later Vedic period. This age had excelled every walks of life. That is, they had everything. That is, their philosophy, their religion, their science, their art and culture was very much defined over during this later Vedic period. For example, early Vedic period, they had classifications: Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras, and Brahmins. But here it was rigid. For example, during the early Vedic period, probably a family of five people. Father will be Kshatriya, mother will be Vaishya, son will be Shudra, and his wife will be a different class. And these people were from one single family, and there was no compulsion that one person has to follow the other. But over here, during the later Vedic period, what we can find is that suppose a father is Shudra, his wife also has to be Shudra, and his kids also has to be Shudra, and they can only get married or have a matrimonial alliance towards only their own communities. And with the progress of the Aryans in North India, the center of civilization was shifted towards eastern side, that is Saraswati, between Saraswati and Ganga, the seat is Indus Valley's Aryan civilization. And with the progress of Aryan settlements in eastern and southern part, that is, it started to expand. This is my side. Okay, your side will be here. So they started expanding towards the eastern side and southern side, and this not just a territorial expansion. This is their ideological expansion as well. For example, if India, uh, Siachen is a disputed territory. And what happens when we have the authority of the Siachen, which means that we are overpowering the China. So this is similar explanation, similar implications. What happened? What are the implications that the territorial is expanding? They are having a sort of like an upper hand over the indigenous people over here in India. And with the progress of Aryan settlements in the eastern and southern part of India, small tribal states of Rigveda were replaced by the powerful state. That is, they started to be more of territorial kingdoms and all. And main famous tribes of Rigveda period like Bharatas, Kurus, Ritus, all these started to be over here. And this is just a classification or the difference between early Vedic period and later Vedic period. And here, joint family system wasn't seen. Here, joint family system was seen. Here, as I've said, there are women poets. They have, participated in samitis and samajams. But over here, status of women are very much reduced considerably. Many of the women have also contributed to the compositions of Vedas. And rigid caste system wasn't seen. That is, anyone could practice it. For here, caste system was sort of like a profession rather than a class system. But over here, it started being more rigid. That is, you are a Vaishya, you have to marry a Vaishya woman, and your children should be a Vaishyas, and they can only marry Vaishyas. They have no rights to marry from some upper or lower caste and sectors. And Gurukul system of education was seen. Gurukul system of education was further continued and enlarged. That is, over here, what we can find is that like the Aryana caste. These, forest dwelling people was remotely, located over here and there. But over here, a full-fledged educational system was, being set up over here. The education system is flourishing. And the domestication of animals was primary occupation, agriculture was secondary occupation. That is why, because they were nomads, they used to travel from one place to the other, and for those reasons they cannot invest themselves in high-end cultivations. For them, they need, probably they'll be staying in a place for 3 months, so they can only sow seeds for something which they could harvest in 3 months. And the primary occupations of them was domestication of animals, that is cattle rearing and herding. But over here, what happened? They started settling down. They started, staying at one place, having territorial, authority over the place. For those reasons, agriculture came into the foyer, and this came to be the primary occupation, and the domestication of animals came down to be secondary. And here, cattle was important source of wealth. Here, land is important source of wealth. We can see the stark differences. Why? The lifestyle change. For the lifestyle change, their preferences also changed. And many were engaged in trade and commerce. Trade guilds had formed with use of coins and better transport facilities led to growth in trade and commerce. So just imagine that, this is just a hypothetical example. India 40 years before, 40 years now. So we have developed in sort of like educational, political, infrastructural sectors. So these people, the trade was very much amateur, but over here, full-fledged systems, trade systems, and all these functionaries started to form. And over here, occupations were weaving, carpentry, pottery, and all here. Here, other, hardcore or mainstream professions like physicians, musicians, and this Charaka, the famous, surgeon was here during this period and all. And position of women, if you could see that, these are already being discussed. The woman was given equal status, but over here she is being reduced, and she could take part in all the social gathering. Here she was not allowed to take part in all these religious functions, and she was given education. Why? Because women are being poet, women are composing all these Vedas. So what does that mean? They have some sort of a knowledge. They had got some sort of like an education. Without education, you cannot compose or write poems. So this is an implications. Here, women are not poets. They are not composing anything. Why? They didn't get enough education for that. They had freedom to choose their husbands. For example, we have seen, what is the term called? Vivaha yoga. No, no. Swayamvar. Swayamvar. Okay, we have seen in all these TV serials of all these ancient mythologies and all, these women, they had power to choose their own husband. That is Swayamvar. But over here, it started to be different, and widows weren't allowed to remarry, and monogamy was practiced, but polygamy was also practiced. But here polygamy was seen more, because polygamy, why? People started to be more rich in the sense they having a territorial authority. Since they have territorial authority, they started earning more, and earning more, one of the implications of being rich is having lots of spouses. And child marriage, sati and Padda, they didn't exist over here, but here sati started to be formed, and women scholars existed who composed all these hymns. And here it is not being known. The reason is that they weren't encouraged to study, they were encouraged to have education systems. And these are the Vedic societies. We all know, and we are completely thorough with all the Vedic society and hierarchical system. Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. So, who are Brahmanas? They are priestly classes, these clergymen, the people who are sort of like bridge between humans and the god. So, and the Kshatriyas are the warrior clans, people who are going to protect us. And Vaishyas are all these, middle income class people, farmers, cultivators, merchants, and all these traders. And Shudras were people who are involved into low lying, or low income fetching sort of like occupations, that is cleaning labor and farm labors and all. And these are the on the aspects of Varna system. The difference is that during the early Vedic period, Brahmins, they explain the Vedic text and perform religious ceremonies, and Kshatriyas, they were the ruling, these people, that is the Rajas and all, they had Janas, they had their own clan to look after. And Vaishyas are common people of traders, agriculture, and Shudras. And servants are people, they didn't had any property, but they used to work in other people's land and all. And here, one thing is that everything is same, but as I said earlier, probably there are five people, and five people could be engaged into different categorical occupations. It's totally dependent upon their wish. And Shudras wearing, outraged from the society. Shudras wearing considered to be untouchables, and the hierarchical system weren't much prominent. But over here, what we can find is that all the Brahmins, they enjoyed high end positions and all, and they use religions to legitimize, to to prove the point that yes, we are above all these people, with all these rituals and all. So you need to please your god, fine, do me a favor, give me two cows and give me these 500 gold coins and all, so then god will be pleased. And with all these rituals and customs and practices, these Brahmins, they started to get all these high position powers. And Kshatriyas, yes, the reason why Kshatriyas also got good powers, because Kshatriyas are the people who are, they are the privilege of saving all these people. And Kshatriyas also were the people who had to collect taxes. Initially, during the early Vedic period, the tax was just, it's totally dependent upon this ways. It wasn't voluntary. It was, voluntary. But here, the thing is that it started to be more of a necessity. You have to pay tax. And yes, during the later Vedic period, we can find new sector or new classifications of occupations over here. That is carpenters, weavers, then spinning weavers, then goldsmiths, and all these different categories, occupations of people that we can find during later Vedic period. And life of Shudra was very miserable. They were, considered to be very untouchable, very, people of lower caste. They're considered to be second types of humans. They were not considered to be humans, and they were not allowed to drink water from common well. They were supposed to live off in separate community, not coming to mingle with the other people. They were not allowed to get into religious or social functions of the society. So lots of ill treatments were there. And here, that is, if you have seen again, there's Mahabharata, Ramayana, and all, you can find is that there are classification in the lifespan of a person. Here, such concept wasn't there during the early Vedic period, but in the later Vedic period, we can find that 125 is brahmacharya. That is, this is the period for a single human. These are male oriented, okay? These period during a man from 1 to 25 years old is to develop in terms of knowledge, wisdoms and all. And after 25, grihastha. Grihastha means to be a husband, to look after your whatever responsibility that you have. 25 to 50 when he gets married and leads a family. Then is Vanaprastha ashram, that is 50 to 75 spent in meditation and prayers, and at last 75 to 100 years they have to be yogis or renouncing, going back to Himalayas or going to forest for having an aesthetic life. And these are the olden traditions. And Gurukul system over here is that they existed here and it was just an amateur form of it. That is probably started off like a person or yogi will be there in a forest and then different people coming and asking that could you teach our sons or could you teach our daughters, and that has started. And yes, pupils are also settled over here in their own places. Here it was well organized, sort of like an institute. A systematic, elaborate system started to be formed over here, and pupils stayed with Guru as well over here for all the aspects, not just for having knowledge in history, geography, or economics or science, but for all the emotional, mental, spiritual, all the aspects. And they learned Vedic literature, that is mathematics, law, astronomy, astrology, and logic, and ethics. And fees were in charge, that is, all these students, suppose they are living at the Guru's place, and they have to, everyone has to work together for food, and it was a collective process of living, and at the end they have to give guru dakshina to the guru, and children belong to rich and poor had to stay together. To run the gurukuls, people had to perform various duties like gathering fuel, begging alms and all. So it was a collective process of living together. And the agriculture, if you could look into it, here they stayed in villages, and they prayed to God for rain, good harvest. Like I said, they were totally dependent upon the climate. Here also, they were totally dependent upon the climate. And but the difference is that the religious practices, they tend to be more refined and tend to be more, rigid in stance. And agriculture was primary, and Bali, Yava was only grain known, and domestication of animals were there, and yes, these are the informations that we already discussed. And here we can find these long-term, serials. That is, like I said, they will be settling only for 7 to 8 months, or 5 to 4 months. But over here, during the later Vedic period, since they are being settlers over here, they don't mind investing in agriculture or crops which will yield them harvest, or which will, they could harvest after 8 or 9 months, because it's totally okay for them since they are settling over here. So for those reasons, other forms of agriculture also started to be formed over here, and the crafts were weaving and clothes, and metal working were known. And over here, iron was largely used because since it was kingship, since the kingdoms were established, they needed more iron for all these types of warfare. And since many types of occupations started to form, that is all these blacksmith, goldsmith, and weaving, carpentry, they need iron for that. And crafts such as leather working, making, all these developed during this period. And trade and industry was, they traded, it was simpler during the early Vedic period, but over here we can find lots of structural changes and systems are being elaborate over here. Here it was just an amateur trade system, and whatever things that they procured, they would trade that. But over here, ships were used, and to flourish their trade, they knew that we have to extensively trade both inland and far out land, and for those reasons they used to invest a lot in the ships and all. And cows was standard unit of value, but over here they started to have their own forms of currency. And horses and bullock carts were used for carrying goods, but over here we can find they knew that, they understood the province of trade. For those reasons, they were ready to to travel long distance using ships so that they could have lots of trade ties with the other nations as well. And they also transported goods through inland rivers. Also, rivers is within one place. Okay, for example, from Madhya Pradesh to Bhopal, just Bhopal to Maharashtra, just a small distance I'm talking about. But here they don't mind traveling far away also as well. So this is a coin that we're talking about, Niksha and Satmana. So this was, started to be used from the later Vedic period, and yes, these were the patriarchal family, and like a typical patriarchal family, that rigid systems of Vedic culture that we can find is that daughters are considered to be, the mystery for the head, and the head of the family was also the son, and son was given the inheritance of the father's property and all these things, and male ancestors were worshipped. Varna system became more prominent. That is, you cannot have mingling with the other Varna systems, and polygamy prevailed. Marriage from the same Gotra was no longer permitted. For example, if I could say, Gongnis, if you could just take into considerations, Gongnis, they have different castes within themselves. Sure that they have equal, status among each other, but they are not supposed to marry within. A Shanoi cannot marry within a Shanoi. Shanoi can marry a Dutt, and Kammat could marry Bhatt. And it was like that. Okay, they cannot marry within the family because they believe that it was, marrying, it was considered to be incest. So those reasons, incest means marrying within one's own blood relation. And widow remarriage was discouraged. And yes, the sati and all these social evils started to be formed over here. And women's education was completely restricted over here. And women were considered to be very lower. That is, from the class system also we could understand that the Shudras were lower, and even below them were the women's stratas, and they were not allowed to participate in assemblies, and British caste system, and Brahmin Kshatriyas enjoy many privileges, and Vaishyas were indulged in trade and agriculture. Shudras were meant to serve the other three classes. And yes, so that's it for today's class, and I really hope that I was able to convey myself to you. So today we just discussed in briefly about Vedic culture, that is the early Vedic culture and the later Vedic culture. We also discussed the differences between the Indus Valley civilizations and the Vedic culture as well. So this was today's class, and tomorrow we'll be talking about the pre-Mauryan period and the Janapadas and all. So is there any doubt that you want me to ask? You could ask me now because I'm about to end the class. So is there any points that you want me to convey to you more precisely? Yes, so this is what I'll try to make my slides even more interesting for the coming classes. I'm sorry if my slides are not that very good looking. I'll try to make more colorful with lots of added slides, pictures, and all. So if there's anything else that you want to ask me, you could ask me now because I'm about to end the class. So that's it for today's class, and I really hope that you could enjoy it. And if you want the PPT slides, I'll be uploading that in my Telegram channel, and you could get the address of my Telegram channel from the description below. And yes, that's it for today. So bye all.